Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Terp Family Fundamentals webinar series. My name is Kate Belquist, and I work in the Office of Parent and Family Affairs. And today I'm joined by Dr. Kimberly Bethea of the Learning Assistant Service here at the University of Maryland. And as we get our next few people joining in on the call, we have about 100 people with us today. It's super exciting. We want you to know that we know that your students are going to you for help in their decision-making processes, and we know your students are going to you when they're in the middle of tackling their problems, big or small. That could have been call on the payphone 30 years ago and the problem was already taken care of, and now we know that your students are calling you as they are navigating those challenges in the moment. And we recognize that supporting your student through those times can be especially challenging as your role in your relationship with them is changing. So we really encourage all families, when you get those calls, to stop, look, and listen as your student is presenting you with a challenge. Helping them examine the problem, brainstorm solutions, and letting them choose their next steps can be really essential. And we do like to emphasize that during the normal course of events, there is no problem that can arise at the University of Maryland that can't be solved using the many resources available to them here. So that's what our webinar series is intended to help you with, to become informed consultants on the resources we have available for your student on campus. Whether they need the information today or tomorrow, we want you to be empowered to be able to help them. So a little bit of light housekeeping. We have 40 to 45 minutes together as a group, and we will be taking questions throughout the presentation, and also, of course, save time at the end for those as well. And having said all of that, I'm excited to hand over the presentation to our campus partner. Welcome, Kimberly.
All right. Well, thank you, Kate, for the opportunity. I just want to make sure I'm okay. Everyone can hear me. I think that things are going well on this end. So thank you all so much for joining the webinar. As Kate mentioned, I am working in the University Counseling Center, and I direct the Learning Assistant Service. And there we go. Okay, just trying to adjust the slide here. So I direct the Learning Assistant Service, and as I start today, I want to tell you a little bit about what we do here in the Counseling Center. Oh, actually, let me go back. So Kate has actually already talked about the stop, look, and listen a bit. And so what I want to do is just remind us that the Counseling Center is here in the Shoemaker building, and there are actually 5 divisions of the Counseling Center. We have the Accessibility and Disability Service, the Counseling Service, my unit, which is the Academic Support Unit of the Counseling Center, and we are the Learning Assistant Service, and then also the Research Unit and the Testing Office. And so obviously I'm not going to go into any detail about those, but I want to just kind of get started. But before we do, we're going to have a poll. We're going to do a couple of polls, and so Kate is going to get those polls up for you all, and we want you to respond to a couple of questions that we want to get your feedback about. And the first one has to do with whether or not you have seen your students' early warning grades. So have you received or seen your students' early warning grades? And of course, this is just a yes/no response. And so if you can, I can't see it on my screen. Okay.
The majority now haven't seen it.
Say it again.
The majority haven't seen it.
The majority have not seen their students' midterm grades. Okay, so that is interesting. And so thank you for letting us know about that. And so we're going to go ahead and pull up the next poll, which is an opportunity for you to share what you feel is your students' #1 challenge. So what do you feel is your students' #1 challenge? Is it time management, effective studying, class attendance, organization, or procrastination? Interesting. And certainly I know that procrastination and time management are, often typically related, but not always. Okay, so about 50% effective studying, high 20s, 28% time management, and then procrastination, and a little bit of organization. But most of us feel pretty confident that our students are attending class, so that is good to know. So time management and effective studying are some of those things that we feel are our students' biggest challenges. So as we start today's webinar, I want to just go through some things that we feel are really your role as parents in supporting your students' success. And the first thing is just encouraging a healthy daily routine, particularly for those who may have first-year students who are in college. So one of the things that's really important for parents to do is to help students develop a routine, something that's really going to be healthy for that particular student. And what's a healthy routine for one student obviously may not be the same for another student. Also, helping the students to develop independence and self-responsibility. So helping your student to understand how to be an independent college student and to take responsibility for things that are happening to them academically. And then helping make academics the priority. We definitely encourage students to take advantage of all of the different opportunities, the clubs, the organizations that are here on campus, but obviously academics are our priority, and we want to help make that a priority. And then helping them to learn from mistakes. We all know how important it is for us to personally have learned from mistakes that we made. And so it really is an opportunity for students to think about decisions that they made, what were the consequences of those decisions, and then to learn from that as they move forward. And then also your role, and very important role, is to know campus resources so that as students come to you to talk about any challenges that they may be experiencing, things that they're going through, that you are able to help them to know where to go to seek help and solutions for some of their challenges. And as we start also today, I want to reiterate that I certainly recognize that you are the expert as it relates to your student. You know your student's strengths, you know your student's growth areas, and so that's why it's particularly important for you to know what resources are available on campus so that you can direct your student to those resources. My role and our role here in the Learning Assistance Service is really to be sort of experts as it relates to learning skills and study skills. And so those are the things that we are helping your students with. And we see you as parents, we see you as our partners in helping students to be successful. So what we thought we would do for today's webinar is to present a couple of scenarios to get us to thinking about situations that our students might be facing. And so the first scenario is this. You know, you may get that frantic phone call from your student saying that, you know, my student's feeling overwhelmed with schoolwork. The student might say, you know, all the other students that she knows have lots of free time, but she has to spend all her time studying. So what would you do in a situation like this if you were to get this type of phone call from your student? Well, the first thing I think that's really important to do is to help to normalize the student's feelings. So our student might feel, you know, very much that she's the only one having to do all of this studying and that other people are just having fun. And so what we want to do is kind of help the student to normalize the feelings and acknowledge that college is challenging and that it's not something that's going to be easy and that it just requires focus and work. And so what I would encourage in a situation like this is to ask your student how he or she is studying. What is their study approach? Are they studying efficiently? Are they using effective time management strategies? Are they using between class time to get any of their work accomplished? And do they have a regular routine or study schedule? Often what we found in our office when we meet with students individually is that a student might say, you know, I study every night from 5 to 10 p.m. or something like that. And when we start asking questions, we find out that obviously we don't want any student really studying literally from 5 to 9 p.m. There should be breaks in between. But we'll ask the student, what are there any distractions? You know, are they using their cell phone? Are they on social media while they're studying? Are they watching television shows in between? So what are some distractions that might be interfering with the effective study time? We also are trying to find out from them what is the best time of day for them to study. Maybe they're trying to study at a time that is just not their most productive time. So we want to make sure that we ask all of those questions in determining what really is the issue, because we always want our students to be effective. We don't want them to be stressed out as it relates to their studying and their academics. And so we're always trying to find that out. So I want to take an opportunity now to see what questions there may be. Are there any questions, Kate, that?
Okay, so we have one question that's come in so far, and the question is, how can you support a student with a diagnosed anxiety disorder and maybe some depression? The student may have their own therapist and is addressing it on their own, but how can the Learning Assistance Center help that particular student?
So if a student has that sort of a diagnosis and they already are receiving help, and we're certainly, first of all, very glad to know that the student is receiving some help in that area. And so one of the things that we could do is really to offer the student some additional accountability. So we do individual academic coaching with students, where students can schedule meetings with any of our staff, and they could do things like work on developing time management schedules, checking in, going through sort of assignments and just making sure that assignments are being completed, helping students to just stay on track with assignments, planning out their entire semester so that they know when assignments are due, because sometimes that can be anxiety producing if a student feels that assignments are coming at them and they're not expecting them. So just helping them to organize their schedules in a way that they feel in control of getting assignments completed. That's something that we do quite a bit with. And so it really depends on what the student needs. We really personalize our academic coaching to meet the needs of the student. So some students may need a bit more than others. So sometimes those regular meetings are just helpful, just checking in, going through assignments. Did you get this completed? When is the next assignment coming up? What is your plan for getting those assignments completed? So those are the types of things that we could do with students individually. Okay.
So we have another question that's come in, and I'm sure this applies to a lot of parents and families. Is there anything that parents and families can do to really help their children transition, particularly missing class? So maybe not skipping out on everyone, but here or there missing a class or two. How do parents and families help them?
So I think one thing that's really helpful is helping the student to understand the benefit of being in class. What I find is that when students can see a benefit from doing something, then they're more likely to do it. And certainly we know this as parents. But when they understand how important it is to hear the information themselves, and if they don't hear it themselves, then they're going to have to just do that much more work outside of class. But I would try to find out, why is it that they're missing class? Is it that they're oversleeping? Is it an early class and they're oversleeping for a class and missing it for that reason? Or is it because they just feel that, the information isn't so useful? So I would try to figure out why is it that they're missing that class. But I always try to make students understand that that's where the learning starts. The learning starts, when you're hearing that information during lecture, and then it's critically important to actually be there yourself. So I think just trying to get at why they're missing that class. Is it that they're just oversleeping and missing it, and then we need to deal with the time management piece and organization, or is it because they just don't feel like that information is helpful? We talk with students about levels of learning, and so often we talk to them about Bloom's taxonomy, and some of you may be familiar with that, where you have these different levels of learning. And one of the things we reiterate with students is that they are trying to get to the higher levels of learning, and being in lecture and going to lecture and hearing that information gets them to some of those higher levels while they're in class, and that's, again, less work that they have to do outside of class. Okay. All right, so we're going to move forward to our next scenario here, another what would you do scenario. And this one says, my student struggles with math, so with my strong recommendation, he went to one of the campus tutoring services and didn't find it helpful. So, well, first of all, obviously, as a parent, you have to know what the resources are so that you can refer your students to the resources. And so it's very good to know that there are a myriad of resources. There are, dozens of resources available for students. So in a situation like this, I would encourage the student to try some of the other resources. If it's a math course or a math-based course, then encourage your student to go to instructor and TA office hours. So that is something that I actually would start with, is the instructor and TA office hours, because all of the instructors, all of the TAs are required to hold office hours, and I would encourage your students to do that. I also, from time to time, we have students who tell us that they have classes during their instructor office hours, and we'll say, well, you can reach out to the instructor in that case and ask if they can meet with you at a different time. So it's not that they can only meet with their instructor or TA during office hours. They can actually meet with them during other times. But I also encourage you to know that there are other resources available. There is a math success program for math tutoring, and that program is offered through the Department of Resident Life in Oakland Hall, and they meet Sunday through Thursday evenings from 6 to 9 p.m. The math department also offers a tutoring program. I believe their hours are either 8 or 9 a.m. until about 4 p.m. each day, Monday through Friday, and that's in the basement of the math building. My office offers a guided study sessions program, and we offer it for many of the math courses, Math 140, 115, and 141, and we're adding other courses every day. And it is a collaborative learning group program where students meet outside of the classroom to review course content. And then there are other tutoring programs like the Academic Achievement Program and the OMSI office, Office of Multi-Ethnic Student Education. And both of those offices, their tutoring programs are for all students, not just the students in their program. I always also encourage students to give it a second chance. So sometimes students will tell me they went to the math department tutoring and it was just very busy and they didn't feel like they got the attention that they need. And so I would encourage students to think about a different time of day to go. So try to go at a time where there's less traffic. And so I'll suggest things like 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. or even at the latter part of the day when fewer students are moving around campus. Typically between 10 and 2, those are the popular times where campus is just really, really busy. So if students use those resources out of those times, then they're more likely to get the help that they need. Also, if they're going to, for example, math success around midterm times and around the popular exam times, it's just going to be busier. So I encourage students to try to go to tutoring throughout the semester and not just right before an exam, but that they're distributing their help, if you will, throughout the entire semester. So I think we can see if there are any additional questions that have come up in the chat box so far.
So this is similar in the vein to the Math Success program and tutoring, but particular to the Writing Center. Those can sometimes book up well in advance. Are there any recommendations that parents and families could provide to their students who want to improve their writing skills, other than going to the Writing Center, the teacher or TA, or perhaps in the meantime who they can access while they're waiting for that appointment?
Well, one thing I will say also about the Writing Center is that they do drop in hours as well. So you are right in that the actual appointments often do fill up in advance, particularly around the end of the semester when there are a lot of writing assignments that are due. But I know that the Writing Center also offers drop-in hours in McKeldin Library, so students can walk in and get help as well. The other thing is that we have on our staff a person who has a specialty in writing. And so when students are not able to get into the writing center, they could also schedule an appointment with one of our academic coaches. And there's one person in particular, so if they call and indicate that they need help with writing, that's something that they could do as well. The Writing Center, I'm sure, also has some additional online resources and things like that. I'll have to say that I don't have the names of those resources right in front of me, but if I get your information, the person who specifically asked that question, I'm happy to look that up and get that information to you. But I do know that there are a number of online resources that may also be available. But I would encourage you to have your student try the drop-in hours as well, and not just say, well, there are no appointments, but also take advantage of the drop-in hours. Okay, any other questions?
And we have another question that's popped up, and hopefully you can give parents and families some recommendations. But for students who have professors or TAs whose primary language might be different from their own, and so that accent difference and navigating that when you're maybe in a lecture of a couple hundred can be particularly challenging. What would you recommend to parents and families as they support their students experiencing this particular challenge?
That actually is a very interesting question, and one that we have heard before from students. And so I tell you, one thing that I tell students is to really try to get them to know that faculty person or that TA, because I encourage them to spend time around that person, to go to their office hours so that they can become more accustomed to the way that they speak, and it makes it easier, I believe, for them to understand. And so I just encourage them to spend a bit more time around the faculty member, engaging with them during office hours. And then I also think students want to be really open. They want to be open, and they, just to try to be more open about that relationship and communicating with their faculty member. So those are the sorts of things that we encourage students to do, is to go to those office hours, get to know the faculty member, interact, engage with them one-on-one. Other questions? All right. So we're going to move to the next what would you do scenario. So my student has never performed as well as expected on tests. I'm not sure if it's the preparation or test anxiety. So this is something, again, that is very common, and we hear a lot from students and their advisors. Often students who come to us are referred from their advisors and sometimes from their faculty members. So if a student is experiencing test anxiety, one of the things that we would do is to try to find out, is it for one type of class only, or is this something that they're experiencing across the board? So for example, is the student only experiencing this on math tests or on tests where they have to do essay writing? So is it something specific to a particular type of test? That's the first thing that we want to try to figure out, because then some of the strategies that we suggest might be different. So the other thing that we'll start to try to get at is there sufficient preparation? We will ask the student when they started studying for the exam. We encourage students to start studying for an exam 5 to 7 days in advance of the exam, as opposed to 1 or 2 days before. So we want to know that they had sufficient time to master the material, to master the content, because if not, then they are going to be a bit more anxious when they go into the exam room. So we talk to them about their exam preparation, and I would say, in my experience, probably 9 out of 10 times it's related to their preparation for the exam. Certainly some students definitely have anxiety, and many students do have generalized anxiety, and that is going to manifest during exams as well. But often it is the preparation. One of the things that we encourage students to do, in addition to preparing in advance for exams, would be to complete practice exams under exam conditions. Many faculty members, many instructors will provide a practice exam, and we encourage students to complete that exam under exam conditions so that they time themselves, they're sitting at a desk, they're only using the resources that they are going to be able to use on the actual exam. So in other words, they're actually mimicking the entire exam setting. And so that's another strategy to help the students feel like they're more prepared and more in control of the exam. So those are the kinds of things that we would recommend. But in addition to that, certainly just encouraging your student to meet with someone in my office, meet with an LAS academic coach to help them to try to figure out what is the best way to prepare for the exam. And then if it's not the preparation, then they may want to receive some testing as it relates to the anxiety, if it truly is generalized anxiety. Okay. So I think we will now take additional questions.
So there's some questions about retaking midterm exams. I imagine that's going to play into finals. Maybe there's a conflict in terms of timing. But the question is related to, again, that policy around retaking midterms exams. Is there any wisdom that you could offer, or who the student might go to get more information?
I'll have to say that I'm not aware of any policies around retaking a midterm exam. That would have to be something that is instructor specific, but in general, my experience has been that students don't have the opportunity to retake an exam unless the faculty member, for whatever reason, gave that as an opportunity for the entire class to retake an exam. Sometimes faculty members might, I know in some of the math classes in years past, they have gotten a chance to retake one exam or something like that, but my experience isn't that is a broad practice. But if a student does have the opportunity to retake an exam, I think that's great. And I would encourage that student to make sure that they review any problems or any content that they missed and that they did not have complete mastery over. And again, to really approach it as if it is a brand new exam. So again, practice exam under exam conditions, studying in advance of the exam. But that's, again, not something that I know of as being a broad practice.
Okay. We have a couple of questions that have come in related to practice exams. Which subjects do you offer for practice exams, and students have access to answers to really start checking their work?
Well, again, it's course specific, so it's going to depend on the faculty member and the course. For the math department, most of the math, I shouldn't say all, should probably never say all, but the majority of the math courses offer practice exams through the math department test bank. So if you go to math.umd.edu, go under, I believe it's undergraduate resources, you'll see a math department test bank. And through there, they're just organized by course. Many of the other courses, the professors, the faculty members will give practice exams in lots of courses. Not every course, obviously, but in some courses. And some courses, they may give a review sheet. For those courses for which faculty members do not provide a practice exam, I encourage students to make up their own practice exam. That's actually a very effective study strategy. Students can work with other students. They can work in small groups of about 4 or 5 students, and each of them develop 4 or 5 questions, and there you go. They have a practice exam. So even if the faculty member doesn't provide one, I would encourage students to make up their own. And again, a very effective strategy is to prepare your own study questions for an exam.
Okay, so another question that we've had come in relates to how we should advise students who have conflicts between a class and then a review session for another class. How would you advise the students? What are their next steps?
Sure. So that's always a tough one. And so I would encourage the student to try to have a friend in that review session, because I never ever encourage a student to miss a class under just I just don't encourage a student to do that unless they're sick. But if there is a review session that's being held at the same time they're in class, I would encourage the student to, have a friend who's in that class to share their notes with them. Often when instructors do a review session, they may give some sort of a review sheet in advance, and so then the student could ask the friend to share his or her notes with them. I would also ask for the friend to record the session if the faculty member were to give permission. Anytime a student is recording a lecture, they should ask for permission in advance. And so letting the faculty member know that they have a conflict because they are in class, and if their friend could record the review session for them. And then hopefully all of that is yes. But in addition to that, then, the student may also want to meet with the instructor during office hours. If they have a review sheet, they can go through it themselves, and then they can go to the instructor during office hours to address any additional questions that they may have. And then also they may want to use just some of the additional tutoring resources that are on campus. I'm not sure if all of the parents are familiar with the tutoring website. So there's a tutoring.umd.edu website. So you want to always have that website bookmarked and make sure that your student is familiar with that website, because it's the most comprehensive site that has all of the academic support resources for the entire campus.
Great. And I think probably one of the last questions that we'll be able to get to that's come in, students who resist going for help because they take the approach of, well, they're not going to be able to help me. I'm an excellent studier. It's worked for me so far. How would you suggest that parents and families can really encourage students to access tutoring and also LAS resources on campus?
Again, something that's very common because, as you know, our students are so highly qualified, and all of the students who are here at Maryland were exceptional students at high school, and so we often have to deal with sometimes the stigma associated with, in their mind, seeking help. We encourage students to, sometimes what we'll do with parents or even advisors is that we'll start with things that seem less intimidating, if you will, for a student. Something like time management. Almost everyone can appreciate improving their time management skills. And so sometimes just starting with, we're going to work on just improving our time management skills, or starting with something that doesn't feel as big of an issue for the student. So we'll often start there. And sometimes we'll look at it from the perspective of, if you are at a 10 as it relates to effective study skills, 10 being the highest, we want you to do that in a manner that's less stressful, in a manner that's just as effective and efficient as possible. So we often talk with students about doing things smarter and not harder. So we want the study process to be we don't want it to be a stressful process. So we want to eliminate as much of that as possible. So I think that could help. And sometimes I just talk with students about, as older adults, we use resources. I don't do my own taxes. I hire an accountant to do my taxes. So I hire someone who's an expert in that area. I don't fix my own car. I go to a mechanic. And so depending on the student, they may or may not like that, but just approaching it from, we're not saying that you're not capable. What we're trying to do is to give you some additional resources to improve your current strategies. So, all right. So I think those were all the questions that we were going to take right now. And so the last thing I think that we have to share are just some, final takeaways for you. I hope that you all, maybe if you could just share or just think about, something that you learned today that you will approach or try differently with your student, or that you will implement with your students. Certainly, I hope that you would encourage them to take advantage of our resource. But before we just sort of end this, I do want you to think about a takeaway and something that you will carry with you as you move forward throughout the rest of your students' academic career here at the university. All right.
Okay. So actually, speaking of takeaways, all attendees should have access to 4 different handouts that LAS has been gracious enough to share with us, including an academic resources flyer, their brochure for fall 2017, their workshop schedule, as well as the MAP coaching program. So those are all available for attendees, and it will be included in a follow-up email, so that way you have a copy. And we want to thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us this afternoon. A recording of this webinar will be available on the Terp Family YouTube page later this week, and we'll also be providing links from the Terp Family website as well. And you can, if you follow us on Facebook or Twitter, we'll be posting the link to the recording there too. We hope you'll be able to join us for our next webinar on Thursday, November 16th. Scheduled for 12:05 again p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we're going to be hearing from the Career Center on how to support your students' career planning success. So thank you so much for taking the time to hear from us today, and we look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks.